Okay, what if I told you that the very first laws ever written weren't about revenge, but about making things right? Today we're going to head back, way back, like 4,000 years, to ancient Mesopotamia to dig into the world's very first legal code. But before we can even get to the laws themselves, we have to talk about the incredible, almost unbelievable story of how they were found, because they were this close to being lost forever.
I mean, can you even imagine it? You're holding these little pieces of clay baked in the sun over 4,000 years ago, and it slowly dawns on you, you're reading the oldest set of laws known to humankind. That's the exact moment captured by the Sumerologist Samuel Kramer. It's the kind of discovery that just completely rewrites the history books.
So, you're probably picturing some big, dramatic archaeological dig, right? You know, dust flying, shovels, some big eureka moment deep inside a forgotten tomb. But the real story? It's way more surprising. The world's oldest laws weren't even found in the ground. Nope. They were rediscovered completely by chance, literally just gathering dust on a museum shelf.
Okay, so picture this. Kramer's working in the Istanbul Archaeology Museums, and a colleague just casually mentions these two tablet fragments he'd glued together years ago. Kramer's intrigued, so he asks to see it, and they bring out this light brown, sun-baked piece of clay. Not very big, maybe about 20 by 10 centimeters.
And this thing was a mess. I mean, more than half the writing was just gone. And the parts that were left, Kramer himself called them hopelessly unintelligible. But he kept at it, and as he's staring at these ancient cuneiform wedges, a pattern starts to emerge. He sees a prologue, and then a clear series of laws. And that's when the gravity of what he was looking at must have hit him like a ton of bricks. But a law code this sophisticated doesn't just pop into existence, right? It's always a direct response to the needs of a society. So if we really want to understand these laws, we got to understand the world that made them. Let's dive in. Welcome to Ancient Sumer.
Now, as you can see from this timeline, these laws don't show up right at the beginning of Sumerian civilization. They come much later, during a period historians call the Sumerian Renaissance. The empire was basically being put back together, unified, after a bunch of conflict. And really, what better way for a king to cement his power and create a shared identity than to give everyone the exact same set of rules to live by?
And calling these guys advanced is like the understatement of the millennium. The Sumerians were basically inventing civilization as we know it. I mean, get this, their writing system, cuneiform, it wasn't invented for poetry or epic stories. It was invented for accounting. Yeah, to keep track of grain and livestock and trade. And as soon as you have complex trade, what do you need? You need complex rules, you need contracts, you need laws.
So here's the absolute key to understanding them. Their entire world revolved around trying to control two massive, unpredictable rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. To build and maintain the huge canals and irrigation systems they needed just to survive, you had to have mass cooperation. You needed organization on a massive scale. You needed rules. For them, law wasn't some abstract philosophical idea. It was a flat-out survival mechanism.
Okay, so now that we know why they needed laws, let's finally take a look at the code itself. What did justice actually look like to the world's very first lawgiver?
So the code is officially credited to King Ur-Nammu. He was a big deal warrior king around 2100 BC. Now, there is a little bit of a debate among historians. Some think it might have actually been his son, Shulgi, who was a real modernizer, who published and spread the code. But honestly, for us, what really matters is the philosophy driving the whole thing. And here is that philosophy laid out right in the introduction. Before they even get to a single law, the code spells out its mission: to make sure the orphan was not delivered up to the rich man, the widow was not delivered up to the mighty man. I mean, for a government to state that as its core purpose more than 4,000 years ago, that's just remarkable. The structure of the laws themselves was totally revolutionary. It's all written in this simple if-then format. You know, if a person does this, then this is the punishment. And that might sound simple to us, but it was a game changer. It meant that justice was standardized, it was predictable. It wasn't just based on the whims of some powerful judge. And this simple, logical framework, it became the blueprint for pretty much every legal code that came after. The laws that actually survived on the tablet give us this fascinating peek into their world. Now, some things were super serious. Murder, robbery, those got you the death penalty. But most other crimes, they were punished with a fine, a specific fine. Like, if you divorced your first wife, that would cost you 1 mina of silver. If you injured someone in a fight, that had a different price tag. Everything was calculated.
And this idea, justice as a financial payment, is absolutely crucial because it's about to flip what we all think we know about ancient law completely on its head.
All right, and this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn, because this ancient code makes us face a massive misconception we all have about what ancient justice was really like.
When you think ancient law, I bet one phrase pops into your head: an eye for an eye, right? It comes from that other really famous Mesopotamian law code, the Code of Hammurabi. And it has totally shaped our idea that ancient justice was just brutal and all about revenge. But what if that's not where the story of law actually begins? Okay, just look at this. This is a side-by-side comparison of the two codes for the exact same crimes, where Hammurabi's code, which came later, demands physical revenge, literally an eye for an eye. Urnamu's code just says you have to pay a fine. It is a completely different philosophy of justice. One is about paying someone back for what they lost. The other is about inflicting pain.
And here is the absolute kicker. The more, dare I say, progressive code, the one based on fines and compensation, it came first, by about 300 years. That famous eye for an eye system wasn't the starting point for law. It was a later invention that, you could argue, was actually a step backward.
This whole eye for an eye principle has a fancy name, lex talionis, or the law of retaliation. And yeah, it's what Hammurabi's code is famous for. But what the Code of Urnamu proves is that humanity's very first attempt at writing down laws specifically rejected that idea in favor of something else entirely. So, okay, it's a super cool piece of history, right? But why does a 4,000-year-old legal document still matter? What's the real takeaway for us right here, right now? I think the core lesson is this. Our first stab at creating a system of state justice wasn't about getting even, it was about restitution. The main goal wasn't to inflict an equal amount of pain on the person who did wrong. It was about using money, those silver fines, to restore what the victim had lost, to patch up the tears in the social fabric, and, try to make things whole again. And when you think about it, these ancient ideas are shockingly modern. The principle of standardized, predictable justice, so everyone gets treated the same under the law. The idea that it's the state's job to protect the weak from the powerful. The whole debate we still have today: should our legal system be about punishment or rehabilitation? Turns out, these aren't new questions at all. We've been wrestling with them for over 4 millennia. So that leaves us with a pretty profound thought, doesn't it? That little clay tablet, rediscovered just by chance in a museum, it does more than just change a few dates in a history book. It challenges our basic assumptions about human nature. It suggests that our very first impulse, when we tried to build an organized, just society, wasn't for revenge. It was for restoration. And that is definitely something worth thinking about.